My wife's surprise baby shower made me realize the baby isn't mine. The streamers hanging from our back porch looked perfect against the afternoon sun, pink and blue twisted together like DNA strands. I stood at the kitchen window watching our guests arrive, feeling that warm pride that comes with knowing you're about to become a father. 7 months of anticipation, 7 months of painting the nursery and reading parenting books, all leading to this moment. Then I noticed something odd. My co-workers from Meridian Systems were arriving in clusters, but they weren't acting like people coming to celebrate. They huddled near the fence, whispering and glancing toward the house. Steve from accounting kept checking his phone and looking nervous. Dave from IT wouldn't make eye contact with me when I waved through the window. "Honey, why did you invite so many people from my work?" I called to Jessica, who was arranging gift bags on the patio table. She was 8 months pregnant now, glowing in that way everyone talks about, her dark hair pulled back in a messy bun that somehow looked perfect on her. "I thought it would be nice," she said without looking up. "We're all like family there, right? Besides, some of them specifically asked to come when they heard about the shower. That struck me as strange." Jessica worked in HR at Meridian, while I was in the software development team. Our departments rarely interacted, and I couldn't imagine why my colleagues would specifically ask to attend our baby shower. But Jessica had been handling most of the party planning, and I'd been grateful to let her take the lead. More coworkers arrived. The atmosphere felt increasingly awkward, like everyone was in on some joke I hadn't heard. When my boss, Richard Novak, showed up carrying a gift bag, I knew something was definitely wrong. Richard had never attended any employees' personal events in the 5 years I'd worked for him. "Congratulations, Michael," Richard said, shaking my hand with more force than usual. His eyes darted toward Jessica, then back to me. "This is exciting times. Really exciting." The way he emphasized the word exciting made my stomach tighten. I watched him join the cluster of my co-workers, and their whispered conversation immediately intensified. Whatever they were discussing, it involved frequent glances in Jessica's direction. I walked over to join them, but the conversation stopped abruptly when I approached. "Hey guys, thanks for coming," I said, trying to keep my voice light. "Pretty crazy that we're finally having a baby, right?" Silence. Steve cleared his throat and mumbled something about congratulations. Dave stared at his shoes. Only Richard seemed able to maintain normal conversation, but even he seemed forced and overly cheerful. "So, when are you due exactly?" asked Tom from security, a question that seemed innocent enough until I noticed the way everyone else tensed up when he asked it. 6 weeks, I replied. "Beginning of October." More silence, more awkward glances. I was starting to feel like I was missing some crucial piece of information that everyone else possessed. The shower officially began with Jessica opening gifts while seated in a decorated chair we'd borrowed from her mother. The presents were surprisingly generous. Electronics I couldn't afford, designer baby clothes, expensive toys. I found myself wondering how my co-workers, most of whom I knew weren't particularly wealthy, had managed to buy such lavish gifts. "Oh, this is beautiful," Jessica said, unwrapping a handcrafted baby blanket that looked like it cost several $100s. "Who's this from?" "Anonymous," said Carol from payroll, though she seemed to know exactly who had given it. Jessica opened gift after gift from anonymous donors. A professional baby monitor system, a top-of-the-line car seat, a stroller that cost more than my monthly car payment. Each time she asked who it was from, someone would say, "Anonymous," or "It's from all of us," in a way that suggested specific knowledge they weren't sharing. I started paying closer attention to the dynamics around me. My co-workers weren't just acting strange. They were treating Jessica with a familiarity that didn't match what I knew about her relationships at work. Dave, who I'd never seen speak to Jessica before, was laughing at her jokes and seemed completely comfortable around her. Steve kept making inside references that she understood, but that went right over my head. "Remember that time with the copier?" Steve said to Jessica, grinning. "Oh my God, yes," she laughed. "I thought we were going to get caught for sure." "Caught doing what?" I wondered. As far as I knew, Jessica rarely left the HR department during work hours. The strangest moment came when Jessica opened a gift that was clearly lingerie disguised as maternity wear. It was obviously expensive and definitely not appropriate for a baby shower, but instead of being embarrassed, Jessica just smiled and quickly moved on to the next gift. "That's interesting maternity wear," I commented. "It's European styling," said Richard quickly. "Very practical." How would Richard know about European maternity wear? And why did he answer for Jessica? As the afternoon progressed, I noticed more troubling details. My co-workers kept making jokes about overtime and late nights at the office, while glancing meaningfully at Jessica. When someone mentioned how hard it must be for me to travel so much for work, leaving Jessica alone, there were knowing looks exchanged around the group. "You're on the road a lot these days," observed Frank from maintenance. "Must be tough on Jessica, being alone so much." "I manage," Jessica said, but something in her tone suggested there was more to that statement. I thought about my travel schedule. The company had been sending me to client sites more frequently over the past year, usually for week-long trips. I'd actually been grateful for the extra money, especially with the baby coming. But now I was wondering if there was another reason I'd been selected for so many out-of-town assignments. Richard approached me as the party was winding down. "Michael, could I talk to you for a minute? Privately?" We walked to the far corner of the yard, away from the other guests. Richard looked uncomfortable, like he was about to deliver bad news. "Look, this is awkward," he began. "But there's something you need to know. Something that came up on our security system." My heart started racing. "What kind of something?" "We installed new cameras in the office a few months ago. Motion activated, record everything after hours. Mostly to prevent theft, you understand." He paused, clearly struggling with how to continue. "We found some footage that, well, that involves Jessica." The world seemed to tilt slightly. "What do you mean, involves Jessica?" "She's been coming to the office after hours, with someone, multiple times over the past several months." Richard looked genuinely pained. "Michael, they weren't there to work. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach." "You're saying she's having an affair? At our office?" "The footage is pretty clear about what they were doing." "I'm sorry, Michael. I really am." I looked back toward the baby shower, where Jessica was still opening gifts and laughing with my coworkers. Everything I thought I knew about my life was crumbling in real time. "Who?" I managed to ask. "Who is she with?" Richard shook his head. "That's the problem. The man's face isn't visible in any of the footage. We only see him from behind. It could be anyone from the company." I stared at the group of my male coworkers, all of whom had been acting so strangely today. Any one of them could be sleeping with my pregnant wife in my own office building. "How long has this been going on?" "The earliest footage we have is from about 9 months ago." 9 months. Right around the time Jessica got pregnant. "Richard," I said, my voice barely steady, "I need to see that footage." We agreed to meet at the office later that evening, after the baby shower ended and Jessica was asleep. I spent the rest of the party in a daze, watching my wife interact with my coworkers and wondering which one of them was the father of the child she was carrying. Every interaction took on new meaning. When Steve helped Jessica carry some gifts inside, was that innocent helpfulness, or something more intimate? When Dave made a joke that made her laugh, was there history behind that joke? When Tom from security asked about her due date, was he asking because he already knew the answer? The party finally ended around 6 o'clock. My coworkers filed out with subdued congratulations and promises to see me at work on Monday. The contrast between their awkwardness today and their usual office behavior was striking. "That went well," Jessica said, as we cleaned up the wrapping paper and gift bags. Everyone seemed to have a good time. I studied her face, looking for signs of deception or guilt. She seemed genuinely happy, glowing with what I'd assumed was pregnancy joy, but now wondered might be something else entirely. "A lot of my coworkers showed up," I said carefully. "More than I expected." "Well, you work with good people," she replied. "They care about you." "Do they?" I wondered. "Or are they here for an entirely different reason?" That evening, I told Jessica I had to go back to the office to finish up a project that was due Monday morning. It wasn't entirely a lie. I did have work to catch up on, though that wasn't why I was going. Richard was waiting for me in the parking lot. The office building looked different at night, more ominous somehow. As we walked through the empty hallways toward his office, every shadow seemed significant. "I want you to know, Michael, that I debated whether to show you this," Richard said as we sat down at his computer. "But I figured you had a right to know." He pulled up a security interface I'd never seen before. Multiple camera feeds from throughout the building, most showing empty offices and hallways. He scrolled back through the recorded footage, selecting dates from several weeks ago. "Here's the first incident we recorded," he said, clicking on a timestamp. The video showed the main entrance to our building at 9:15 p.m. on a Thursday night. I watched Jessica enter using what appeared to be a key card, followed a few seconds later by a man in a dark jacket. The angle and lighting made it impossible to identify him, but his build suggested someone I might work with. "She has access to the building at night?" I asked. "HR personnel have 24-hour access for payroll and other sensitive operations," Richard explained. "But this clearly isn't work-related." He fast-forwarded through the footage. Jessica and the unknown man moved through the building together, eventually disappearing into what looked like one of the conference rooms. "Do we have cameras in the conference rooms?" "No. Privacy policies prevent us from recording in meeting spaces. But," he pulled up another camera feed, "we do have audio sensors that activate when there's noise." Richard played an audio file from the same time period. At first, there was just silence, then voices too muffled to understand clearly. But the sounds that followed were unmistakably intimate, unmistakably sexual. I sat in that chair listening to my pregnant wife having sex with another man in my workplace, and I felt something fundamental break inside me. "There's more," Richard said gently. "Multiple nights over several months." He showed me footage from different dates. Always the same pattern. Jessica and the mystery man arriving separately, spending hours together, leaving at different times. The man was careful to keep his face turned away from cameras, suggesting he knew about the surveillance system. "Someone who works here?" I said. "Someone who knows about the cameras. That's what we think. The way he avoids the camera angles, he definitely knows the building layout." Richard pulled up more files. The frequency was staggering. 2 or 3 times a week for months, always on nights when I was traveling for work. "Richard, who knew about my travel schedule in advance?" He thought about that. "Travel requests go through HR for approval and scheduling. Jessica would have seen all of your trip requests before anyone else." The implications hit me like a sledgehammer. Jessica hadn't just been having an affair, she'd been coordinating it around my work travel. She knew exactly when I'd be out of town and arranged her rendezvous accordingly. There's something else, Richard said. Something that made me feel like I had to tell you. He pulled up HR records on his computer. Jessica's employee file appeared on screen, and he scrolled down to recent activity. She put in her 2-week notice yesterday, he said, effective immediately after maternity leave. She what? She never mentioned quitting her job. According to her resignation letter, she and her family are relocating out of state for personal reasons. Family. Jessica had been planning to leave town with someone, and that someone wasn't me. I stared at the computer screen, trying to process the scope of the betrayal. Not only was Jessica having an affair, not only was the baby probably not mine, but she was planning to disappear with her lover and take the child with her. Who has access to this footage? I asked. Just me and the head of security. And now you. I need copies of everything. All the footage, all the audio files, all the HR records. Richard nodded. I figured you'd want that. I've already burned everything to a secure drive. He handed me a small USB drive. The weight of it in my hand felt disproportionate to its size, like it contained the complete destruction of my life. Over the weekend, I studied every frame of footage, listening to every audio file, looking for any clue about the identity of Jessica's lover. The man was frustratingly careful about concealing his identity, but I started noticing small details. His height, his build, the way he walked. By Sunday evening, I'd narrowed it down to 3 possibilities from my co-workers who'd attended the baby shower. Steve from accounting, Dave from IT, or Tom from security. All 3 were the right height and build, all 3 had access to the building security system, and all 3 had acted strangely during the party. Monday morning at work felt surreal. I sat in meetings with these men, wondering which one was sleeping with my wife and planning to run away with my child. Every interaction felt loaded with subtext I was only beginning to understand. During lunch, I approached Tom from security privately. If anyone would know about the camera system and how to avoid it, it would be him. Tom, can I ask you something about the security cameras? He tensed up immediately. What about them? Just wondering how comprehensive the coverage is. Are there any blind spots someone might exploit? Why are you asking? His defensiveness confirmed my suspicions. Just curious about building security. You know, with everything going on in the world. Tom relaxed slightly. The system is pretty thorough. But yeah, there are a few areas with limited coverage. Why? No reason. Just wondering. But Tom's reaction told me everything I needed to know. He was nervous about the cameras, and he knew exactly where the blind spots were. That evening, I confronted Jessica. I couldn't continue living this lie. Watching her prepare for a baby I was increasingly certain wasn't mine. Jessica, we need to talk. She was folding baby clothes in the nursery, surrounded by all the expensive gifts from the shower. What's on your mind? I know about the affair. She froze, a tiny onesie in her hands. What are you talking about? I've seen the security footage from the office. I know you've been meeting someone there for months. Jessica sat down heavily in the rocking chair we'd bought for nursing. Her face had gone completely white. Michael, I can explain. Explain what? Explain how you've been having sex with one of my co-workers in my own office building? Explain how you coordinated it around my travel schedule? Explain how you're planning to quit your job and leave town? Tears started flowing down her cheeks. It wasn't supposed to happen this way. What way was it supposed to happen? I never meant to hurt you. I never meant for any of this to happen. But it did happen. For months. Who is he, Jessica? She was crying too hard to answer. I waited, watching this woman I'd loved for 3 years fall apart in front of me. It doesn't matter who he is, she finally managed to say. It matters to me. It matters because that baby you're carrying might be his. Jessica looked up at me with an expression of complete devastation. Michael, I'm so sorry. Is the baby mine? She didn't answer, which was an answer in itself. How long? I asked. How long have you been lying to me? The affair started about 10 months ago, but I never stopped loving you. 10 months. The baby was due in 6 weeks, which meant she'd gotten pregnant right around the time the affair began. Who is he? Jessica shook her head. I can't tell you that. It would ruin his life. What about my life? What about ruining my life? That's different. How is it different? He has a family. He has kids. The betrayal deepened with every word. Not only was Jessica having an affair, she was protecting her lover at my expense. Not only was she carrying another man's child, she was more concerned about his reputation than my emotional devastation. You're leaving town with him. We haven't decided anything yet. Your resignation letter says otherwise. Jessica looked surprised that I knew about her resignation. How do you know about that? It doesn't matter how I know. What matters is that you've been planning to disappear with another man's child while letting me believe I was going to be a father. You could still be the father. Do you think I am? She didn't answer. Jessica, do you think I'm the father of that baby? I don't know for sure, but you have suspicions. The timing. It's hard to say, which meant she knew. She knew the baby probably wasn't mine, and she'd been planning to let me raise another man's child while she eventually left town with his real father. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, listening to Jessica breathe beside me, wondering how long she'd been planning this deception. The nursery was right across the hall, painted yellow because we'd wanted to be surprised by the gender. Now I realized the surprise was on me. The next morning, I called in sick to work and went to see a lawyer. Diana Foster specialized in family law and had handled divorce cases involving paternity disputes. "Mr. Garrett," she said after I'd explained the situation, "this is more complex than a typical infidelity case because of the pregnancy. What are my options? First, we need to determine paternity. That can't be done definitively until after the baby is born, but we can request court-ordered DNA testing. What if the baby isn't mine? Then you have no legal obligation for child support. But if your name is on the birth certificate and you've acted as the father, establishing paternity can be complicated. And if the baby is mine, then you have full parental rights, regardless of your wife's affair or her plans to relocate." I hired Diana Foster that day and began the legal process of protecting myself from what was looking more and more like an elaborate deception. Over the next few weeks, I watched Jessica prepare for a baby I was increasingly certain wasn't mine. She bought cribs and car seats, washed tiny clothes, and talked excitedly about our future together. Either she was an exceptional actress, or she'd somehow convinced herself that everything would work out. Meanwhile, I was gathering evidence. I installed a small recording device in her car and another in her purse. I monitored her phone calls and text messages. I followed her on weekends when she claimed to be shopping for baby supplies. What I discovered was worse than I'd imagined. Jessica wasn't just having an affair. She was part of a larger pattern of deception at Meridian Systems. Using her position in HR, she'd been facilitating multiple affairs between employees, trading information and access for personal favors. The man she was sleeping with was Tom from security, just as I'd suspected. But Tom wasn't just having an affair. He was using his access to the security system to help other employees conceal their own inappropriate relationships. The baby shower I'd thought was about celebrating my impending fatherhood was actually a farewell party for a group of co-workers who'd been participating in systematic workplace corruption. The expensive gifts at the baby shower weren't generous gestures from my colleagues. They were payments for Jessica's silence about various affairs and policy violations she'd discovered through her HR access. I took this information back to Richard, who immediately launched a formal investigation. What we uncovered was a network of employees who'd been using the workplace for personal relationships, with Jessica acting as a coordinator and Tom providing security cover. "This goes back almost 2 years," Richard told me. "Jessica has been documenting affairs, policy violations, and ethical breaches, then trading that information for money and favors. She was blackmailing people? More like running a protection racket. Pay her, and she'd make sure certain things didn't appear in official HR records. Refuse to pay, and suddenly you're facing disciplinary action for violations she'd documented." The baby shower took on an entirely different meaning. Those weren't gifts from caring co-workers. They were tribute payments from people Jessica had been extorting. What about Tom? Tom was providing security access and camera avoidance information. He was also having the affair with Jessica, but that seems to have been separate from the larger scheme. So the baby might be his? Based on the timeline of their relationship, it's possible. I felt sick. Not only was my wife having an affair and carrying another man's child, she was a criminal who'd been using her pregnancy as cover for workplace extortion. Diana Foster advised me to go to the police immediately. "This isn't just about your marriage anymore, Michael. This is about criminal activity that could implicate you if you don't report it." I met with Detective Ray Collins the next morning. He listened to my story with growing interest, especially when I showed him the evidence I'd gathered about the workplace corruption. "Mr. Garrett, we've been looking into some irregularities at Meridian Systems for several months," he said. "Your information might be the break we needed." "What kind of irregularities?" "Financial discrepancies, unexplained policy violations, employee complaints that were mysteriously resolved. We suspected internal corruption but couldn't prove it." Detective Collins asked if I'd be willing to cooperate with an investigation. The plan was for me to continue gathering evidence while they built a case against Jessica and her co-conspirators. "What about my wife? What about the baby? If she's been involved in criminal activity, she'll face appropriate charges. As for the baby, paternity testing will determine your legal obligations." I agreed to cooperate with the investigation. For the next 3 weeks, I wore a wire during conversations with Jessica, recorded our phone calls, and documented her activities. It was the most emotionally difficult thing I'd ever done, living with someone I loved while gathering evidence to destroy her life. The breakthrough came when Jessica tried to recruit me into the scheme. "Michael," she said one evening as we sat in the nursery folding baby clothes, "I've been thinking about our financial situation. What about it? With the baby coming and all the expenses, maybe we could use some extra income. I'm already working as much overtime as I can. I mean different kind of income. There are opportunities at work that could benefit us." She was testing me, trying to see if I'd be willing to participate in the corruption she'd been orchestrating. "What kind of opportunities?" "People pay for discretion, for certain information to stay private, for certain problems to be resolved quietly." "You mean blackmail?" "I mean providing a service. People have personal situations that could affect their careers. I help them manage those situations." It was a full confession, recorded on the device Detective Collins had given me. "How much money are we talking about?" "Enough to take care of the baby. Enough to give us options." "What kind of options?" "Options to relocate if we want. Options to start over somewhere else." She was still planning to leave town, and now she was trying to make me complicit in her crimes before she disappeared. That night, I called Detective Collins and told him I had enough evidence to proceed with arrests. "We'll move tomorrow morning," he said. "Are you prepared for this, Michael? Once we arrest your wife, there's no going back." I thought about Jessica sleeping in our bedroom, 8.5 months pregnant with a child that probably wasn't mine, planning to flee town with another man while taking money she'd extorted from our co-workers. "I'm ready." The arrests happened at Meridian Systems the next morning. Jessica was taken into custody in the HR office, along with Tom and 3 other employees who'd been part of the corruption network. I watched from the parking lot as my pregnant wife was led away in handcuffs, her belly prominent under the maternity dress she'd worn to work. Richard called an emergency meeting with the entire staff to explain what had happened. The investigation had uncovered systematic workplace corruption involving multiple employees over more than 2 years. Several people were facing criminal charges, and the company would be implementing new oversight procedures to prevent similar situations. "This is obviously a difficult situation for everyone," Richard said, "but we want to assure you that the company is committed to maintaining ethical workplace standards." I sat in that meeting surrounded by co-workers who'd attended my baby shower just weeks before, knowing that some of them had been paying Jessica for protection from disciplinary action. The gift table at our party had been funded by extortion money. Jessica was released on bail that afternoon, but she wasn't allowed to return to our house due to the ongoing investigation. She stayed with her sister while awaiting trial. I filed for divorce the next day, citing adultery and criminal activity. Diana Foster was confident we could get the marriage annulled entirely based on the fraudulent circumstances, but I wanted the divorce to be official and comprehensive. "What about the baby?" Diana asked. "DNA testing as soon as it's born. If it's mine, I'll take full custody. If it's not, I want nothing to do with any of this." Jessica went into labor 2 weeks early, while she was still staying with her sister. I got the call at 3 a.m. on a Wednesday morning. "Michael, she's at the hospital," Jessica's sister told me. "She's asking for you." I drove to the maternity ward feeling conflicted about everything. Despite all the betrayal and criminality, Jessica was still the woman I'd loved for 3 years, and if the baby was mine, this was my child being born. Jessica looked exhausted and frightened when I entered the delivery room. The months of legal proceedings and criminal charges had taken their toll. "Michael, I'm so glad you're here," she said. "How are you feeling?" "Scared. About everything." The labor progressed quickly. Within 3 hours, Jessica delivered a healthy baby girl. As the doctor held up the newborn, I felt a complicated mix of emotions: relief that the baby was healthy, uncertainty about paternity, and sadness about everything that had led to this moment. "She's beautiful," I said, and meant it. The baby did look like Jessica, with dark hair and delicate features, but I couldn't see any obvious resemblance to myself or to Tom from the brief glimpse I'd had. "What are you going to name her?" I asked. I was hoping we could decide together. "Jessica. We're getting divorced. If she's not my daughter, we're not deciding anything together." The DNA test was conducted the next morning. Detective Collins had arranged for expedited processing, and we'd have results within 48 hours. Those were the longest 48 hours of my life. I went to work, attended meetings, completed projects, but my mind was entirely focused on the test results. If the baby was mine, everything would change. I'd be connected to Jessica forever through our daughter, despite the divorce and criminal charges. If the baby wasn't mine, I could walk away from this entire nightmare and start over. Diana Foster called me at work on Friday afternoon. "Michael, we have the results." I stepped outside into the parking lot, needing privacy for whatever I was about to hear. "The DNA test confirms that you are not the biological father." Relief and sadness hit me simultaneously. Relief that I could walk away cleanly from Jessica's deception. Sadness that the child I'd been preparing to love for 7 months would never be part of my life. What happens now? Tom has been informed that he's the biological father. Given his current legal situation, custody will likely be complicated. Tom from security was facing criminal charges for his role in the workplace corruption. He'd probably be going to prison, leaving Jessica to raise his daughter alone. What about Jessica's charges? She'll likely plead guilty to avoid a trial. With a newborn in Tom's situation, the prosecutor might recommend reduced sentencing. I hung up the phone and sat in my car in the office parking lot, trying to process the end of the life I'd thought I was building. No wife, no baby, no family, just a job and an empty house, and the slow work of rebuilding from scratch. Jessica was convicted of conspiracy, extortion, and workplace fraud. She received 2 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 18 months. Tom received 4 years for his role in facilitating the corruption network. The baby, who Jessica named Sophia, went to live with Jessica's sister during Jessica's incarceration. Tom's parental rights were complicated by his criminal conviction, but he'd have the opportunity to establish a relationship with his daughter after his release. I moved out of our house and into a downtown apartment. The nursery we'd painted yellow stayed exactly as we'd left it, waiting for parents and a baby who would never live there together. 6 months later, I ran into Jessica at a coffee shop. She was out on parole, working at a discount retail store, looking tired but healthier than she had during the trial. Sophia was with her, now almost a year old and starting to walk. "Michael," Jessica said when she saw me. "How are you?" I'm okay. How's Sophia? She's good. She's walking now, getting into everything. We made awkward small talk for a few minutes, like strangers who'd once shared something significant, which I suppose was exactly what we were. Jessica, can I ask you something? Sure. Do you ever regret it? Any of it? She thought about that for a long moment, watching Sophia play with a napkin she'd found on the floor. I regret hurting you, she said finally. I regret the choices I made, but I can't regret her. She was right. Sophia was innocent in all of this, a beautiful child who deserved love and stability, regardless of the circumstances of her conception. I hope everything works out for you both, I said, and meant it. Today, 2 years later, I'm remarried to a woman named Carol, who works at the library and has never shown any interest in workplace corruption or systematic deception. We're expecting our first child together in the spring, and this time, I'm confident about paternity. Sometimes I think about that baby shower, about all those expensive gifts funded by extortion money, about my co-workers celebrating what they knew was another man's child while I stood there proud and oblivious. It was the last moment of innocence in what I'd thought was my life, the final scene before everything I believed about love and trust and family fell apart completely. But it was also the beginning of something better, something real, something built on honesty rather than deception.